Good morning. It's so exciting to be here. What a spectacular facility, and this is an amazing university that's doing something really important by bringing together scientists and engineers and public policy and the community together. I want to talk to you a little bit about what's happening with the Global Resilience Institute. If there's a theme that's been walking across what you heard from Carla Broadley and David Lussey and Jeff Trussell, it is this whole issue of interdependency of the systems, of the networks, and of the communities that we rely on. Now, one of the challenges that goes with all that deep interconnectedness is the interdependency that also is involved with that. And if we have a shock in one location or one node, it causes cascades across those systems, often and potentially resulting in catastrophic failure. This is the resilience challenge that we need to be taking on. Now, part of what we're wrestling with is that the networks that we have built, the systems that we have built in the 20th century that support modernity, these systems were built for efficiency. In some cases, were built for safety, but they weren't built for security or resilience. That is, the architects that built the foundations that we rely on for our modern way of life, those architects didn't really think about what if somebody with malicious intent targets the systems that we're building? Or what if we have a shock? How will the system better withstand and recover from that shock so that we assure the continuity of function? That is our challenge, is to figure out how we now both retrofit resilience into systems that weren't built that way, as well as we innovate and go forward, how we make resilience a key element of that effort. Now, we have a compelling story of this, as Jeff Trussell just highlighted, and this is the Superstorm Sandy tale. Not only did the lights go out in Lower Manhattan, but also they lost their transit system. The tunnels were flooded. The telecommunications systems went down, and for the first time since the 19th century, the stock market went out of business for 2 days. Health hospitals went down, and very importantly, 90% of our health care now is actually provided outside of hospital settings, and many of those places where people go for dialysis or where they go for cancer treatments, those places were knocked out for 2 to 3 weeks. That highlights this degree of interdependency and the challenges we face when we have shocks, that we need to have a much deeper understanding of them. Now, the fact is that where we live and how we live is just putting us at risk for these kinds of shocks. The reality is that if the average American stays put where they live right now, okay, just stays put for the life of a mortgage, 90% of them will probably come face to face with a disaster. It'll be an earthquake, it'll be a hurricane, it'll be a wildfire, it'll be a tornado, it'll be a mudslide, you name it, stay there, mayhem is coming your way. But it's not only going to be local, it's going to cascade. And that's where we really have to get out in front of this challenge. And getting out in front of it really requires an extraordinary degree of collaboration. And it is because that at its heart, there are some important barriers to becoming resilient. Now, I had yet to find anybody out there who's embracing brittleness and fragility as something that they want to achieve. Resilience is something that resonates with us, but what's keeping us from getting there? Well, first is a really tricky science problem. We have to understand these systems, their interdependencies, their interconnectedness, and how shocks can affect on them. Second, we don't design for resilience. So that's a really important engineering issue. How do we design systems not just to withstand a shock, but to be able to essentially fail gracefully, recover nimbly, and adapt going forward? That's a really challenging engineering problem. And then we have to scale this in a hurry. That's going to require incentives. That's an economic and business challenge. Fourthly, we're not organized to do this. We have to find ways in which we pull sectors together, where we put people across multiple jurisdictions to get us to where we need to be. And that's a governance and a public policy problem if I ever met one. And then finally, we're not in training and educating the future practitioners and researchers in this. And that's obviously an interdisciplinary educational challenge. It's going to take a lot of collaboration. And then collaboration's got to go beyond just in the university. We have to collaborate with practitioners in the public sector, in the private sector, and within civil society. So what's the Global Resilience Institute about? We're essentially trying to take on supporting that level of collaboration, but also managing resilience across multiple levels. We want to take this on at the individual level, where our health colleagues are so important. It turns out a lot of resilience insight comes out of psychologists. And understanding why would some of us, when put under stress, really have a hard time bouncing back, while others, it's like water off the back of a duck. What's going on with that? Why is it that some small communities, when faced with a trauma, come right back and others don't? Those sets of issues are something that come very heavily out of our social science and health science realm, and they give us great insight to then look at systems like global systems, like the intermodal transportation system. They basically the conveyor belt that allows us to connect globally and make goods move around the planet. And then we have our built environment, but our built environment, again, is interconnected. It's tied into the natural environment, as Jess was just talking about. It's tied into systems, lifeline infrastructures that failed, like we saw with Sandy. And needing to understand this, we need to bring together, at Northeastern, we're making this commitment, all 9 colleges here involving in research to advance individual, community, and societal resilience. Now, we can't do this all alone, though, because no university can take this thing on by themselves. So like my other colleagues, our institutes are focused on building partnerships. It turns out the rest of the world is wrestling with these problems as well. And we have distinguished colleagues in places from the Fraunhofer Institute to New Zealand at Massey University who are all engaged in some element of resilience. And the Global Resilience Institute is going to create a bit of a clearinghouse, a place that brings us together to take this on. In the end, our goal is not to just help you survive in the face of global turbulence. It's to help us thrive. Thank you.